Welcome friends to another r/idontworkherelady video. If this video gets 1,000,000 likes, we'll begin groundwork on the first ever Karen Attitude Adjustment School. So every like contributes to a good cause. And our first story of the day is by Tresco Plesco, How I Was Employed and Fired in 2 Seconds. I'm shopping in a store, and some crazy old hag starts yelling at me for not helping me. For info, I came in just for 1 or 2 things, so I didn't get any cart. My hands were pretty full. I didn't take 1 or 2 things, but actually 4 or 5. In short, my hands were full, and this crazy old lady wanted me to get something for her from the top shelf. I told her that I would help her, but I didn't have a free hand. Oh boy, yelling started. It was all about youngsters not helping their seniors, youngsters not having enough respect for their seniors, etc. Well, to that respect remark, I said that I have respect for those who respect me, and if she wants to yell at me, I wouldn't help her. Well, that wasn't good because she started yelling again. Well, she never stopped in the first place, and she started demanding to see my supervisor. One of the employees came and asked what was going on. The crazy old lady started again yelling from the start about respect, not helping, etc., and wanted me fired. She didn't believe that I didn't work there, so the manager came. The manager listened to all the stories and told us to wait for a while with another tantrum from the crazy old lady. When the manager came back, he had paper and a pen and told me to sign it. I was a little confused, but read it and immediately understood. It was an employee contract. I signed it and then heard from the manager, "Well, you're fired. Goodbye," and tore the contract apart. Crazy old lady was stunned, then red, but when almost everybody started laughing, she left. I was laughing for a really long time. I love that the manager in this situation didn't even say or try to do much. They basically went and did like a prop show that completely exposed this Karen for just being a crazy ranting old lady. If given the chance, would you happily sign that paper and take part in the charade? Let me know in the comments down below. Our next story is by Granite Blanco. Dress for the job you want, not the job you have. The management company that oversees my apartment building has always been total poop. Packages go missing from the mailroom, repairs take forever, staff are unfriendly, not at all worth what we pay in fees. There was only one solid employee, and he almost made up for everyone else's incompetence. The janitor, Ruan. He kept everything sparkling clean and even pitched in when other people slacked off, helping with repairs, ID checking in the lobby, and more, just because he took pride in the building. Then the corporate oversight of the management company changed, and the new boss was having all of the properties inspected to do a quality spot check on the individual building managers. Our manager, the winner that he is, decided the best course of action would be to not come in the day of the oversight visit so that it would have to be cancelled. The hope was the checker would just inspect what he could without the manager on site, which wasn't much since he'd have already made the trip out there. My apartment has terrible cell reception and no AC, so I spent a ton of time downstairs in the lobby, which has both. I was able to overhear most of the planning for this visit as a result. Our janitor Ruan knew too, and he was spiffing everything up like new and excitement, fixing a few broken things the repairs guy ignored and even bringing in fresh cut flowers to the lobby out of his own pocket. Ruan dressed up in a collared shirt and khakis for the visit. He didn't know the manager was bailing. I just heard it hanging out in the lobby late one night. So when the corporate inspector arrived, Ruan was the only guy he saw. He was dressed up, so the inspector shook his hand and started rattling off the things he wanted shown to him. Ruan knows this building better than anyone else on the staff, so you could tell he was a little overwhelmed at being seen as the point person, but he knew the answers to every one of the inspector's questions. Meanwhile, a few tenants and contractors who frequent the building past and all knew Ruan brought him concerns about their apartments. Those on staff who knew we were being inspected even made a point to say, "Yeah, Ruan's the guy if you got a problem." So the end of the inspection must have come because they recongregated in the lobby. The inspector told Ruan he wanted to get his full name so he could make a note in his employee file of how well he's run the building so far, and that he'd meet with him later in the week to discuss fixes for the problems he's found. Ruan, shocked, is like, "You want to meet with me again?" And the inspector's like, "Sure, I'm looking forward to a long working relationship. I like to meet with each building once a month. Sorry, what was your name again for the file?" Ruan told them, and the inspector goes, "Hold on, I thought someone called Eddie was the manager here." And Ruan explained, clearly embarrassed and scared he'd done something wrong, that he isn't the manager. The manager didn't come in today. The inspector then went and spoke with a few people in the building on his own, while Ruan absolutely lost his crap in the lobby, thinking he was going to be fired or get the building censured or something. Eventually, the inspector comes back, and he sits Ruan down and tells him he might not be a manager in title, but he's a manager in action. So if he wants it, he's got a new job. The man cried. Ruan's been working as a contractor through a janitorial service, not directly for the building, so no benefits, considered part-time, very little job security or support, and he'd just gone from that to a cushy office job in the building he loves in the blink of an eye. I was sitting on the couch a few spaces down from them. The lobby has a sitting area with tables and chairs and couches, and I felt compelled to ask, before anyone got too excited, "Hey, excuse me, can you do that? Or could someone veto this?" Because I hated to think Ruan would be so excited only to have some sort of bureaucracy or old boys club shoot down his promised opportunity. The inspector turns to me and informs me he's the new COO of the management company and final hiring decisions are at his sole discretion. Then he asked who I was, and I basically said I was just leaving, and I freaked off out of there before my big mouth complicated things any further. This week, Ruan started officially. We've got flowers in the lobby every day now, and a dripping faucet I've been waiting 6 weeks to have fixed is scheduled for repair on Thursday. He didn't work there, but he does now. This is like one of those awesome stories of rags to riches that you always love to hear. Somebody with a great idea or a passion for their job, and they go from some low janitorial position and they work their way to the top. It reminds me of the story of the guy who invented flaming hot Cheetos, who started as a janitor and eventually ended up retiring as an executive for the company. That's the kind of stuff you love to hear. Our next stories by The Answer is really 42. Chipotle, once you get hired, you can never leave. So a bit of background, 7 years ago, in college, me and my wife used to work for Chipotle. In fact, it was where we met. As we worked there, we amassed quite the selection of Chipotle t-shirts, and for those of you that don't know, the design is a small Chipotle logo on the front and a large design on the back. Back in the early 2010s, the designs were quite imaginative and had some pretty funky art on the back, which actually might be something you might want to be seen wearing. My wife's friend, a woman who through remarkable patience and tenacity actually became successful in the company, who still works there, hooks her up with the newer shirts. And yeah, they're not as good as before, with boring designs talking about special offers and real ingredients. Eventually, working there became too much for me, and I fell out with the management and quit. I was so mad at them, I was going to burn my shirts as an act of catharsis, but my wife persuaded me to let her have them for work, even though they were way too big for her, and so she amassed quite the collection. I'd estimated at about 20. She persevered for a while after I left, getting promoted to a kitchen manager, and then after we left, the huge collection of work shirts became her loungewear and pajamas. It's like when I got hired, I could never really leave because half the time I see a Chipotle girl wandering around the house. Harmless enough, but once or twice, she's actually gone into Chipotle wearing one of these shirts, and occasionally weird stuff happens. So the first one was about 2 or 3 years ago. We'd been out the previous night, it was a Saturday, and we'd both gotten pretty drunk. When we'd gotten home, I'd helped her into bed and she'd just thrown on a t-shirt and fallen asleep, and then me not long after. I woke up the next morning feeling a lot better, had breakfast, but she was still pretty hungover from the previous night, so I just sat and played games for a few hours until about noon. I went in and asked if she wanted food, and she did, but she wanted to go to Chipotle, as she felt burgers would be gross in her hungover state. She'd been sleeping on her back, however, so I hadn't noticed she was wearing one of her favorite shirts, a huge, oversized, for her, one she'd gotten from me that featured a lettuce shouting "Lechuga" on the back, and an avocado which replies "Gesundheit." As I said, the old designs were actually quite cool and weird. She slipped on an old pair of my Lakers basketball shorts, a hoodie which covered up her t-shirt, hence me not seeing it, and some sunglasses to hide her hangover, and then we left for Chipotle. She brightened up on the way considerably as well, so everything seemed fine. We got our food and started eating, and then as it was hot, she took off her hoodie and said she'd be off to the restroom. I didn't think much of this, and again, I didn't notice the back of her shirt. So for a while, I carried on eating and finished, and then I'd noticed my girlfriend hadn't come back from the restroom. So I sent her a text asking if she was alright. She sent one back saying, "Long story," and then a few minutes later came back laughing. What had happened is she'd gone to the restroom, and when she came out, ran into a woman who asked her, "What do you think you're doing coming in dressed like this?" It turned out this was the store manager. She thought my girlfriend was a new hire, and she proceeded to tell her off for coming in dressed in such a sloppy manner. An oversized uniform shirt and baggy basketball shorts give a poor impression of the company, and that she'd have to go back home and change, and that she was going to be written up. My girlfriend started to get angry in response. Then she looked down and then at the reflection on the back of her shirt in the glass behind her and realized that the t-shirt she'd thrown on the last night was in fact, yes, a Chipotle uniform. So, an easy mistake to make. She explained she was actually a customer and this was her boyfriend's old work shirt, and started to apologize for coming in dressed this way and confusing the manager, at which point the manager apologized for telling my girlfriend off, and the two women spent about a minute in a loop of apologizing to each other. Finally, the manager offered my girlfriend a buy one get one free card for the mistake, and so in the end, there were no hard feelings. So we got some free food from this one, and it was hilarious as well. That was one of our experiences. The other was actually a few weeks ago, and since the last time we got married, so she's now my wife. Now that lockdown's lifting and we can go out, a little while ago we went to Chipotle on a Sunday evening, and yeah, my wife was rocking a Chipotle shirt again. We figured that as it was quite late in the evening, there wouldn't be many people there, it would be pretty chill and we couldn't be bothered smartening up, so we just went as we were. Also, the store we frequent seems to always hire super nice staff as well, so it's always been good. We go in, and yeah, there's only one or two people there, so it should be fine, right? We order, and the guy who made our food for us gave her a double take, but didn't really say anything. The girl on cashier, however, smiles and says, "I like your shirt." And my wife says, "Oh, I don't work here now. There's life after Chipotle." And they have a nice conversation about college and how things are nowadays and the pandemic, etc. I think she was about 17, and she enjoyed the conversation so much that she gave us our meal for free. I leave a nice tip for the cashier and the other staff as well, because I remember how good that felt at the end of the shift. And so we're heading towards our seat, and the evening has a general good vibe to it so far. However, then we hear, "No, you're doing my bowl wrong. I want this salad." Jab, jab, greasy fingerprints on sneeze guard. "You're still doing it wrong. My God, how freaking stupid can you be?" And so on, and looking over my shoulder, I saw a woman who was working on one of those customers who's the nightmare of all Chipotle workers, the self-entitled customer who believes that by yelling and creating a scene, they can get whatever they want. If you're wondering why everything she said is in all caps, it's because she never lowered her voice and stopped yelling while she was in the store. It's the only way I can get across how obnoxious it was to be around her. We sit down, and then she finally gets her bowl made exactly how she wanted it, but it wasn't good enough, and when she gets to our previously happy cashier, she proceeds to chew the poor girl out for it being super slow and it's overpriced. My God, this place is a disgrace, and is just making her life a misery. The cashier's trying to placate her as best as she can, and an equally stressed manager, I don't think much older, appears and tries to calm down her Karenness, but the woman just won't shut up. I just shook my head and started eating, but the manager must have done something to get her to leave them alone, because the Karen went and sat by the door after making a scene of snatching up her food and storming to a table. Karen clearly made quite an impact on the cashier girl as she ran off to the back to cry, leaving her equally miserable looking manager in her place, and generally everything just feels like trash now. We just finished our food and walked out, but as we go past the Karen on the way to the door, we hear, "Hey you, yeah you girl," and we stop. My wife turns around and says, "Excuse me ma'am?" And Karen goes, "Yeah, I know you're leaving work with your boyfriend, but as you're a manager, I want to make a formal complaint." My wife turns back to me, grins and mouths, "What the freak?" Because although she is wearing a Chipotle shirt, she's also wearing neon green running shorts, flip-flops, and a backwards green and yellow baseball cap, none of which are part of the approved uniform. This isn't how Chipotle managers dress. Although I guess Karen figured she was slightly older than the rest of them, she's 28, and thus was a senior manager. My wife finished her time at Chipotle as a kitchen manager, and I'd guess the fact that this customer made our new favorite cashier cry meant that she wanted a little payback for all the time she'd been in the same situation. She does a very, very good customer service persona, all bubbly and sweetness, and she slipped right back into it and then walked over to her and said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, how can I help you?" Karen then goes off into a rant about how the store's badly run, she was kept waiting when clearly trying to mess around and go on a little power trip, and how the employees are all stupid and no wonder they were all on minimum wage and blah blah, generally being a jerk. My wife just listens intently and says with a smile, "Well, ma'am, those are some interesting observations, but I think you can just go freak yourself." Karen is stunned for a second, as well as the staff behind the counter who seem to be enjoying watching someone stand up to this woman, and then says, "I'm writing to head office and you're out of a job, missy. Give me your name." At which point my wife says, "I'm first name OP." Karen writes down her name and then says, "You'll be hearing from head office after they hear from me." At which point my wife says, "And I haven't been a manager at Chipotle for quite a long time, so I can pretty much say whatever the freak I want to you." Karen just stares at her and says, "But you're wearing their shirt?" To which she responds, "Yeah, I'm wearing it because it's a cool shirt and I used to work here. It doesn't mean I work here now, so I can tell you that you're being a massive witch who likes taking her anger out on kids much younger than her, and that I think everyone would prefer it if you just freak off and stop throwing your weight around because Chipotle can't fire me." Karen is stunned, processing a girl in a Chipotle shirt telling her off instead of placating her. And then she pushes past us and says, "This is a freaking disgrace, never coming here again," and slams the door behind her and then drives off quickly. I'm just processing what happened as it was weird, and my wife goes back over to the two girls behind the counter to apologize for saying that to a customer. As I guess as in Karen's eyes, she was a representative of the company, but the girls were cool with it and quite happy that she did stand up to the Karen, and that it was also just a customer versus customer interaction, despite appearances. So moral of the story, if you ever work a fast food job and you want to go back there, make sure you're not wearing your old uniform before you go in. All I can really take away from this is I guess Chipotle uniforms must be kind of cool, because I don't think anybody would show up back to a McDonald's wearing a McDonald's uniform, because it looks so distinctly like a uniform. You wouldn't want to be caught dead wearing that McDonald's uniform anywhere other than on the other side of the counter at a McDonald's. And that lettuce and avocado shirt does sound fun. But with that Chipotle madness being said, that's all the time we have for today. So of all these stories I've read today, which is your favorite and why? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you haven't yet, if you could like and subscribe, that would mean a lot to me. Whatever you do, whether it's liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, all of it helps grow this channel and I appreciate the heck out of it. So until next time, I'll see you all tomorrow with some more stories.